You've had 3 years to plan this, Elias. My relocation bonus is worth $250,000, and if I'm not married by September, we lose it all. Stop being a selfish academic and give me the venue. My name is Elias, a 28-year-old PhD researcher, and I don't operate on emotion. I operate on data. My sister and parents thought they could bully me into surrendering a wedding venue I booked 36 months ago, but they forgot one thing. I specialize in forensic auditing. Before we get into how I dismantled their entitlement with a single USB drive, please subscribe to the channel to support these stories. After my father cut my catering budget to starve me into submission, I discovered my mother had attempted to forge my fiancé's signature on a transfer contract. I didn't scream. I simply invited everyone to a family peace summit with a very specific guest list. If your own mother tried to steal your wedding for your siblings' financial gain, would you cut her out of your life forever or give her one last chance? Let me know in the comments. The temperature in my parents' backyard was exactly 84 degrees. I remember this because I had checked the thermostat on the patio before sitting down. My name is Elias. I am 28 years old, a PhD candidate in forensic data analysis, and I have spent the last 36 months planning my wedding. My fiancé and I booked our venue, the Glass Pavilion, 3 years in advance. It was the only way to secure a September date following my graduation. The BBQ was supposed to be a celebration. My sister Chloe, who is 23, stood up next to her fiancé, Mark. She had a look on her face I recognized, the look of someone about to cash a check they hadn't earned. Mark got the promotion, she announced, her voice rising in that melodic, practiced pitch she uses when she wants something. The London office. But there's a catch. We have to be legally married and relocated by October 1st to secure the $250,000 signing bonus. The table erupted. My parents were beaming. $250,000 is a life-changing sum for someone like Chloe, who has never held a job for more than 6 months. I took a sip of my iced tea. I noticed a single drop of condensation roll down the side of the glass, leaving a perfectly straight trail through the frost. I didn't say a word. I simply calculated the timeline in my head. Then, the pivot happened. The problem is, Chloe continued, her eyes finally locking onto mine, there isn't a single venue in the city available for September. Not one, except yours. The sound of the crickets in the bushes suddenly seemed amplified in the silence that followed. I could hear the faint, rhythmic scraping of my father's spatula against the grill. No one was eating. They were all looking at me, their expressions expectant, as if my consent was a foregone conclusion. "Elias," my mother said, her voice soft but carrying that familiar, manipulative weight. "You've had 3 years to plan. You're organized. You can pivot. Chloe only has 8 weeks. That $250,000 stays in the family if you just let her have the slot. It's for the best." I looked at Chloe. She wasn't asking. She was waiting for me to concede, as I had done for the last 23 years of her life. My pulse was a steady 65 beats per minute. I didn't feel anger yet. I felt the cold, familiar sensation of a data set that didn't add up. "No," I said. The word was small, but in the sudden vacuum of the backyard, it sounded like a structural failure. "What do you mean, no?" Chloe's face began to flush, the pink creeping up from her neckline clashing with her white sundress. "It's just a building, Elias. This is our future. This is $250,000. Are you really that spiteful?" I placed my glass down on the wooden table. The sound of the glass meeting the wood was sharp, like a gavel. "I booked that venue 1,278 days ago, Chloe. It isn't just a building. It is a legal agreement, and I don't break contracts." The peaceful family BBQ ended at that exact moment. My father stopped flipping the steaks. He turned around, his face set in a mask of disappointment that used to make me flinch. Now it just looked like poor strategy. "We'll talk about this inside," he said, his voice dropping an octave. I didn't move. I opened the Notes app on my phone and created a new entry. Title, The Venue Conflict. Time, 4:15 p.m. The siege had begun. The transition from the sun-drenched patio to the filtered light of the living room felt like moving from one stage of a trial to another. The air conditioner hummed at a low, consistent 42 decibels, a sound I found grounding, though the atmosphere in the room was anything but. My father sat in his leather armchair, the one he only uses for serious discussions. My mother stood by the window, her fingers obsessively pleating the hem of her blouse. Chloe sat on the sofa, her eyes already brimming with tears that I knew were calculated for maximum impact. "Elias," my father began, his voice heavy with a manufactured gravity. "We are a family, and in this family we look out for the one with the most urgent need. You've always been the stable one, the successful one. Chloe has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to secure her financial future. $250,000, Elias. Do you understand the math of that?" "I understand the math perfectly, Dad," I replied. I leaned against the door frame, my hands tucked loosely into my pockets. I wasn't shaking. My resting heart rate was likely still under 70. "However, your equation is missing several variables, specifically the 3 years of deposits, the travel arrangements already made by our guests, and the fact that Chloe's financial windfall is not my liability. It is hers." Chloe let out a jagged, theatrical sob. "It's not just about the money. I want to be married in a place that reflects our family's status. The glass pavilion is perfect. You're just being a gatekeeper because you like having power over me. You've always been like this, ever since we were kids. You have to have the best of everything just to rub it in." I looked at her, truly looked at her. I saw the slight smudge of mascara beneath her left eye and the way she checked her reflection in the glass coffee table to see if she looked sufficiently tragic. "Chloe, I booked that venue when you were still dating your previous boyfriend, the one who tried to borrow $5,000 from my savings. I didn't book it to spite you. I booked it because I planned ahead. Your lack of foresight does not constitute an emergency on my part." My mother finally turned from the window. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin white line. "Elias, stop being so clinical. This is your sister. She is stressed. She is trying to build a life. If you don't do this, the rift you create today will never heal. Is a building really worth losing your family over?" The family versus property fallacy. It's a classic manipulation tactic. I took a slow breath, noticing the scent of stale charcoal clinging to my clothes. "The rift isn't being created by my refusal, Mom. It's being created by your demand. You are asking me to set my own life on fire to keep Chloe warm. That isn't love. That's an audit of which child you value more." My father's hand slammed onto the arm of his chair. The leather made a sharp, muffled thwack. "Enough! If you want to talk about contracts and math, let's talk about the catering. I've already sent the wire transfer for the $18,500 deposit for your wedding dinner. That was my gift to you, but gifts can be revoked, Elias. If you can't show a shred of generosity to your sister, then I see no reason to subsidize your selfishness." He looked at me, waiting for the panic to set in. He expected me to do the mental math. $18,500 is a significant hole in a PhD student's budget. He thought he had found my price. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. I didn't look up at him as I spoke. $18,500, I repeated, my voice flat. "That's the price of my compliance? It's a bold move, Dad, but you've underestimated my contingency fund. I've been living on a fellowship and side consulting for 3 years. I have exactly $22,000 in an emergency high-yield savings account for this exact scenario." The room went silent. The only sound was the clicking of my phone screen. I looked at my father. "Keep your money. I'll be calling the caterer tonight to move the billing to my personal card. I assume this means your invitation is now conditional?" "Elias, don't be ridiculous," my mother whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm not being ridiculous. I'm being precise," I said. I turned to Chloe. "And Chloe, I hope the $250,000 is worth it, because by the time you move to London, you'll realize that money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy back the respect you just lost." I turned and walked toward the front door. I didn't slam it. I closed it with a soft, mechanical click that felt far more final than a scream. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus, my legal consultant. "Marcus," I said, my voice steady as I started the engine. "I need you to look at a venue contract, and I need to add a security protocol. Immediate effect." The digital clock on my desk transitioned from 2:13 a.m. to 2:14 a.m. with a silent, ghostly flicker. In the absolute stillness of my apartment, the only audible sound was the consistent, high-frequency hum of my laptop's cooling fans. To anyone else, the blue light of the screen might have seemed harsh in the darkness, but to me, it was the light of clarity. I sat with my back perfectly straight against the ergonomic mesh of my chair. On the screen, my bank's pending transactions portal showed a line item that would have induced a panic attack in most grooms-to-be. 18,500, wing. Status: involuntary reversal. My father had moved faster than I anticipated. He hadn't just stopped the future payment, he had initiated a clawback of the initial deposit through a recall of funds request, citing a contractual error. It was a clumsy move, the kind of financial desperation that usually signals a weak hand, but it was designed to be a killing blow to my wedding plans. I didn't reach for a glass of water. I didn't pace the room. Instead, I opened an Excel spreadsheet titled Wedding Master Audit V4. I navigated to the Catering and Hospitality tab. My hands were steady as I typed the new figure into the liability column. The cell automatically turned red, flashing a deficit of $18,500. Most people think of a wedding as an emotional milestone. I view it as a series of interlocking logistical contracts. When one gear is sabotaged, you don't scream at the machine. You isolate the damaged component and replace it. At 8:02 a.m., I called the Artisan Kitchen. The manager, a man named Julian, whom I had vetted for his reputation for discreet efficiency, answered on the third ring. "Julian," I said, my voice as flat as a dial tone, "this is Elias. You likely received a notification regarding a reversal of the $18,500 deposit from the account ending in 4492. "Mr. Elias, yes." Julian's voice sounded strained. "We just saw the alert. It's quite irregular for a deposit of this size to be pulled back so close to the event. We were about to call you to discuss the cancellation of the service." "The service is not being canceled," I said, my eyes tracking the cursor on my screen. "The account ending in 4492 belongs to a third party whose involvement in this project has been terminated. I am currently authorized to act as the sole guarantor. I have just initiated an ACH transfer for the full amount of $18,500 plus a $500 administrative good faith bonus for the inconvenience. You should see the confirmation code in your inbox within 60 seconds. The silence on the other end of the line was long enough that I could hear Julian's sharp intake of breath. That is very efficient, Mr. Elias. I'll check the portal now." "Excellent. Moving forward, Julian, I am placing a security lockdown on our file. No changes to the menu, the guest count, or the billing information are to be made unless you receive a voice-authenticated password from me or my fiancé. I will email you the encrypted password file shortly." As I hung up, my phone vibrated on the desk. A text from Chloe. "Dad told me what happened. He says he's sorry it had to come to this, but you're being so stubborn. He said the offer is still on the table. Give me the venue and he'll pay for the whole catering bill, plus he'll add another $5,000 for your troubles. Don't be a martyr, Elias. Just be a brother." I didn't reply. Replying to a manipulator provides them with emotional data they can use to recalibrate their attack. I simply took a screenshot of the text and moved it into a folder labeled Evidence Timeline. I spent the next 3 hours performing a vulnerability assessment of my other vendors. Florist, photographer, tailor. I was working through the list with clinical precision until I reached the wedding planner, Sarah. I dialed her number. When she picked up, she didn't say hello. She sounded confused, almost frightened. "Elias, I was just about to call you. I'm looking at the contract amendment your fiancé just sent over via the digital portal. I have to say, I'm surprised you're actually going through with the transfer to your sister." My heart rate for the first time in 48 hours, spiked to 82 BPM. "Sarah," I said, my voice dropping into a chillingly calm register. "My fiancé is currently at work. She hasn't touched the portal in 4 days, and I have never, under any circumstances, authorized a transfer." "But she called me, Elias," Sarah stammered. "The woman on the phone. She had all your security answers. Your mother's maiden name, the last 4 digits of the original card, everything. She said you both agreed that family comes first. The paperwork for the venue transfer is sitting in my pending signature box right now." I closed my eyes. I could hear the faint, rhythmic ticking of the wall clock in my hallway. It was no longer just about a venue or a catering deposit. My mother hadn't just tried to persuade me. She had attempted to commit third-degree identity fraud. "Sarah," I said, my voice now as cold as a surgical blade, "do not touch that file. Do not refresh the page. I am coming to your office now, and I'm bringing my forensic laptop." The air in Sarah's office smelled of expensive stationery and burnt espresso. Sarah was a professional who had handled over 500 weddings, but as I walked in, she looked like she was staring at a crime scene. Her hands were trembling slightly as she adjusted her glasses. "Elias," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I am so sorry. I truly thought—" She sounded so much like Clara. She knew the middle name of your first pet. She knew the date of your first anniversary. I didn't think for a second it wasn't her. I didn't sit down. I stood by her desk, my posture perfectly vertical. I pulled my laptop from my leather briefcase, a ruggedized model I used for field data extraction. "Sarah, emotion is a variable that leads to error. Data is not. Please turn your monitor toward me." She complied. On the screen was the Digital Venue Transfer Agreement, Form 102B. It was a legally binding document that, if signed, would have stripped me of my 3-year reservation and handed it to Chloe for a processing fee of only $250. The fiancé signature line was blank, but the requesting party section was filled out in detail. The IP address used to access the portal was logged at the bottom of the page, 192.168.1.14. I recognized that sequence. It was the static IP for my parents' home office. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady and rhythmic, "your agency records all incoming calls for quality and training purposes, correct?" "Yes," she said, nodding frantically. "I've already pulled the file. I haven't listened to the whole thing yet. I was too shaken." "Play it, from the beginning." The sound of the office's ventilation system seemed to drop away as the audio file loaded. Then a voice filled the room. It was high, breathless, and forced. "Hi, this is Clara, Elias's fiancée," the voice said. It was my mother. She was using a specific lilt she usually reserved for talking to bank tellers or insurance agents. "Listen, we've had a huge change of heart. We want to do something wonderful for Elias's sister. Family is everything, right? We want to transfer the glass pavilion booking to Chloe. Elias is too shy to call himself, but he's right here nodding. Can we start the paperwork?" The recording continued for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. In it, my mother didn't just lie, she performed. She talked about sibling love and the spirit of giving. She used my fiancé's full legal name. She even referenced a private conversation she claimed we had over dinner. I watched the audio waves on the screen, the peaks and valleys of her voice. I felt a strange, clinical detachment. Most people would feel a sense of betrayal. I felt the satisfaction of a hypothesis being proven. My family didn't just want the venue, they believed they had the moral authority to steal my identity to get it. "I need a copy of this audio file, the IP logs, and the draft contract," I said. My voice was so calm it seemed to startle Sarah. "I also need a signed affidavit from you stating that you were contacted under false pretenses." "Elias, are you going to the police?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "I am a forensic researcher, Sarah. I don't go to the police until my dossier is complete," I replied. I watched the progress bar as the files transferred to my encrypted drive. 98%, 99%, complete. At this moment, my mother has committed identity fraud and attempted to induce a breach of contract. I am simply securing the evidence. I closed my laptop with a crisp, mechanical snap. I looked at the clock on the wall, 11:43 a.m. One more thing, I said. Keep the transfer file in pending status. Do not decline it yet. I want them to believe their plan is working. I want them to feel the comfort of a successful heist. Why? Sarah asked. Because the higher the climb, the more kinetic energy is released during the fall, I said. I gave her a short, professional nod. I'll be in touch. As I walked out into the bright midday sun, my phone buzzed. It was a group text from my mother to the entire extended family, including my aunts and cousins. Wonderful news! Elias has seen reason. He's gifting the venue to Chloe. We are so proud of his generous heart. The wedding is back on track for September. Details to follow. I didn't delete the message. I added it to the folder. I had the audio, I had the IP logs, I had the forged document, and most importantly, I had their overconfidence. I sat in my car and dialed my brother Leo. He was the only one who hadn't joined the chorus of Family First. Leo, I said when he picked up. The BBQ was just the opening act. The main event is coming. I need you to be my witness. I returned to my apartment and closed the door. The sound was a dull, vacuum-sealed thud. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. The glow from my dual-monitor setup provided sufficient illumination. It was 1:14 a.m. Most people would be sleeping, but I was currently analyzing a data set that didn't correlate with the narrative my sister had presented. Chloe's fiancé, Mark, worked for a firm called Global Nexus Logistics. I knew this because I had helped him optimize his LinkedIn profile 2 years ago. I also knew that corporate relocation policies for firms of that scale were almost always public record or archived in shareholder reports under operating expenses. The mouse clicked, a sharp plastic sound that felt amplified in the empty room. I navigated to the company's internal global mobility PDF, which I'd found on a public server. I scrolled to page 42, section 8.4, relocation bonuses. I adjusted my glasses. My eyes scanned the text with the same cold efficiency I used for my dissertation. To qualify for the Level 5 expatriate signing bonus, 250 pasanes USD, the employee must provide a valid marriage certificate or proof of civil partnership no later than September 30th of the fiscal year. There it was. A valid marriage certificate. I leaned back. My chair creaked. A low, mechanical groan. I stared at the screen. The policy did not mention a venue. It did not mention a 300-guest reception. It did not mention the glass pavilion. To secure that $250,000 bonus, Chloe and Mark simply needed to spend $80 at the city clerk's office and have a 15-minute ceremony in front of a judge. The urgency Chloe had used to weaponize our parents was a fabrication. She didn't need my venue to save her future. She wanted my venue because I had already done the $50,000 worth of aesthetic labor she was too lazy to perform. I had spent 3 years selecting the lighting, the linens, and the acoustic dampening. She wasn't looking for a relocation solution. She was looking for a turnkey social status. I opened a new spreadsheet. I titled it, Comparative Value Analysis, Theft of Planning Labor. I began to list the items. Glass pavilion booking, non-refundable, $12,000 premium Saturday date. Premium $4,500 bespoke floral arrangement, locked-in price. $8,200 total value of stolen intellectual property, $24,700. My hands were perfectly still as I typed. I could hear the faint, high-pitched whine of the external hard drive as it saved the data. To my family, I was the cold one. To me, I was the only one in the room who understood the actual cost of a lie. Then I saw the latest update in the family group chat. My mother had posted a photo of a bottle of champagne. The caption read, Celebrating Chloe's big day, September 14th at the Glass Pavilion is officially happening. Thank you, Elias, for finally putting family first. The timestamp on the photo was 11:58 p.m. She had posted it after my meeting with Sarah, assuming the transfer she had attempted to forge was a done deal. She was already drinking to her successful fraud. I took a screenshot. I didn't feel the heat of anger. I felt the cool, refreshing weight of leverage. I picked up a fountain pen, a heavy, chrome-plated instrument. I began to write on a physical notepad, the nib scratching the paper with a rhythmic scritch, scritch, scritch. I was drafting the agenda for my meeting with Marcus, the legal consultant. Audio evidence, identity fraud IP log. Evidence, digital forgery, corporate policy, discrepancy, proving malicious intent. Chloe wanted a September wedding. I was going to give her exactly what she deserved. I turned off the monitors. The room plunged into darkness, leaving only the sound of my own steady breathing. I would sleep for exactly 6 hours. Tomorrow, the preparation would be complete. The peace they thought they had bought was a statistical anomaly that was about to be corrected. The meeting with Marcus took place in a room that smelled of old leather and cold, expensive air. Marcus, a man with silver hair and a voice like dry parchment, didn't smile as he reviewed my folder. The only sound was the steady, rhythmic flip, flip, flip of the documents. "This is identity fraud, Elias," Marcus said, his eyes not leaving the audio transcript. "Technically, 3rd degree. Your mother didn't just overstep, she broke the law." "I am aware," I replied. I watched a single dust mote dance in a shaft of light. "I don't want her in a cell. I want her in a position where she can never leverage family against me again." Marcus nodded slowly. He produced a document, a notice of intent to pursue legal redress. It was crisp, white, and final. "This will be our primary leverage. Along with this," he added, tapping a second file, "the security contract for the 14th. I reviewed the security invoice, 2,400 exers. It covered 3 private guards, off-duty professionals, who would be stationed at the pavilion entrance. Their instructions were binary. No password, no entry, no exceptions. "One more thing," I said, sliding a printed invitation across the mahogany table. "I'm hosting a dinner at the Gilded Oak this Thursday. I've invited my parents, Chloe, and her future in-laws. I want it to be a formal peace summit to finalize the venue transfer." Marcus looked at the invitation. "You're leading them into a room where they have no exit." "I'm leading them to a table of their own making," I corrected. "I need you to be there, Marcus. Not as a friend, but as a silent witness with a briefcase." "I'll bring the recorder," he said. I left his office and felt the cool, mechanical click of my car door locking. I sent the group text at exactly 3 p.m. "I've reconsidered everything. Let's meet at the Gilded Oak, Thursday at 7 p.m. to sign the final transfer papers over dinner. My lawyer will be present to ensure everything is legal. Chloe, please invite Mark's parents. I want this resolved for good." The replies came in within seconds. A flurry of hearts and thank you emojis. They thought they had won. They thought I had finally broken. They were wrong. I wasn't breaking. I was calibrating. The private room at the Gilded Oak was a masterclass in atmospheric manipulation. Dim lighting, heavy velvet curtains, and a table set with precision for 10. I arrived at exactly 6:45 p.m. Marcus was already seated in the corner, his leather briefcase resting on the chair beside him like a silent sentinel. He didn't speak. He simply adjusted his tie and gave me a curt, professional nod. At 7:02 p.m., the doors opened. Chloe entered first, wearing a dress that likely cost more than her last 3 car payments. She was beaming, flanked by my parents and her future in-laws, the Wentworths. The Wentworths were old money, the kind of people who valued reputation above all else. "Elias!" my mother chirped, her voice bouncing off the wood-paneled walls. She moved to hug me, but I stepped back slightly to adjust my cufflink, a move that kept my personal space intact. "This is so wonderful, a true family resolution." "The table is ready," I said, my voice level and devoid of any warmth. "Please sit. We have much to document." The sound of chairs scraping against the hardwood floor was rhythmic and harsh. Chloe sat directly across from me, her fiancé Mark looking slightly uncomfortable beside her. My father took the head of the table, looking like a man who had successfully negotiated a peace treaty. "We are so grateful to Elias," my mother told the Wentworths, her eyes shining with practiced deceit. He realized that Chloe's future in London was the priority. Family always comes first in this house. I watched as the waiter poured the wine. The liquid hit the glass with a soft, consistent splash. I didn't touch my glass. I looked at Marcus. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single, sleek tablet and a stack of manila folders. "Before we order," I said, the room suddenly going quiet as I spoke. The clinking of silverware stopped. "I've prepared a summary of the transfer. I want to ensure the Wentworths understand exactly how this venue became available for their son's wedding. Transparency is, after all, the foundation of any good partnership." Chloe's smile faltered, just for a millisecond. A tiny bead of sweat appeared at my father's temple. I didn't look away. I simply tapped the screen on the tablet. "Marcus, if you would." The peace summit had begun. But for my family, it was the start of an audit they weren't prepared to pass. The silence in the room became so heavy it felt structural. The only sound was the faint, rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the hallway. I placed my tablet in the center of the table. "Before we sign," I said, my voice echoing like a dry snap of a branch, "we need to verify the authorization logs." I tapped the screen. The recording of my mother's voice filled the room, high-pitched, desperate, and clearly fraudulent. "Hi, this is Clara, Elias's fiancée. We want to transfer the booking." My mother's face went from pale to a sickly, translucent gray. My father's fork hit his porcelain plate with a sound like a gunshot. The Wentworths, Chloe's future in-laws, straightened their backs, their expressions shifting from polite boredom to cold horror. "That's not all," I continued, sliding a printout of Global Nexus Logistics policy across the table. Section 8.4, Chloe doesn't need a venue for her bonus. She only needs a marriage certificate. This isn't about her career. It's about her wanting a $50,000 aesthetic for the price of a lie. Chloe didn't scream. She didn't have the breath. She looked at Mark, whose face had turned a deep, humiliated crimson. Mark's father stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. "You forged a legal contract?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "I didn't forge it," my mother gasped, her hands shaking so violently she spilled her wine. "I was just trying to help." "You committed third-degree identity fraud," Marcus added from the corner, his voice as sharp as a razor. He placed a formal notice of intent to pursue legal redress on the table. "The IP logs trace directly back to your home office. My client is prepared to file a police report by 9:00 a.m. tomorrow." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. My pulse was a perfectly steady 68 BPM. I looked at my sister, then my parents. They weren't a family in that moment. They were a failed data set. "The venue remains mine," I said, "and the $18,500 for the catering. You'll be paying that back to my account tonight as a settlement fee for the fraud. If the transfer isn't confirmed by midnight, Marcus calls the precinct." The room went dead silent again. The peace summit was over. The audit was complete. The peace summit dissolved like a chemical compound in acid. The Wentworths left the restaurant without saying a word to my parents, their silence a clear indicator of the social death sentence they had just passed on the union. Chloe's fiancé, Mark, followed them, his head down, leaving Chloe standing alone amidst the wreckage of half-eaten appetizers. I didn't stay for the tears. I walked out to my car, the cool night air a sharp contrast to the suffocating tension of the private room. My pulse remained a steady 66 BPM. I drove home in silence, the only sound being the soft hum of the electric motor and the rhythmic clicking of the turn signal. At 11:42 p.m., I sat at my desk and refreshed my banking portal. The notification appeared in the incoming queue. Pay $18,500, sender. Robert Elder. Memo settlement. My father had paid. He knew the data was irrefutable. The group chat exploded one last time before I hit the leave conversation button. Chloe's final message wasn't an apology. It was a desperate, jagged accusation. "You destroyed my future for a building. I hope you're happy alone." I didn't feel lonely. I felt organized. I opened my wedding guest list and highlighted 3 names: mother, father, Chloe. I hit the delete key. The software automatically recalculated the catering requirements, reducing the final bill by $645. My brother Leo called shortly after. "I heard," he said, his voice sounding tired but relieved. "Mom is hysterical. Dad is silent. Chloe is packing a bag. I'm still coming, Elias, and I'm still walking you down that aisle." "I know, Leo," I replied. "The seating chart has already been updated. See you in September." I closed my laptop. The blue light faded, leaving the room in a state of perfect clinical equilibrium. The fallout was complete. The variables were settled. September 14th arrived with a clear sky and a temperature of exactly 70 degrees. The glass pavilion looked precisely as I had visualized it 36 months ago. The light hit the floor-to-ceiling windows at an angle that created a perfect geometric pattern across the white marble. I stood in the wings, adjusting my watch. My heart rate was a resting 62 BPM. Outside the double doors, 3 security guards stood in charcoal suits. They were equipped with a guest list and a voice-authenticated tablet. My parents and Chloe had attempted to arrive an hour early, but according to the security log, they were denied entry at 2:02 p.m. after failing to provide the Tier 3 password. They weren't making a scene. They were simply gone, erased from the day's data set. Leo stepped beside me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "You look ready, Elias." "The logistics are flawless, Leo," I replied. "There is no reason to be anything else." As the cello began the first notes of the processional, a crisp, resonant C major, I walked down the aisle. There were no crying parents in the front row. There was only the sound of the wind through the nearby oak trees and the soft, collective, indrawn breath of 84 guests who actually wanted to be there. I looked at Clara, my fiancée. She looked at me with a smile that wasn't a calculation or a manipulation. It was a constant. We signed the marriage certificate at 3:45 p.m. I watched the ink dry on the paper, the signature permanent and legally binding. The lesson I learned wasn't about the sanctity of family. It was about the sanctity of the boundary. Family is not a blank check for theft. It is a contract that requires mutual respect to remain valid. If the data shows a breach of trust, you don't keep investing in a failing asset. You cut your losses and move toward a more stable future. The room was silent as we were introduced as a married couple. It was a silence I had earned, one that sounded exactly like peace.